my name is Paige, this is Paige's Page, and today we're going to be doing my May wrap-up. Hello, so welcome. I am so excited to talk through the things that I read in May. Normally for these videos I will talk through the stats and then jump into talking about the books. So normally I have a separate monthly wrap-up sheet which I use. However, I've already sticky taped it into my planner. We're just gonna use this. So I'm really excited because I had a fantastic reading month. Before diving into the stats, I'll also let you know that my mother chose the order in which I read my TBR this month, so I'll leave that linked up above. There were only 15 books and the first stat is that I've read 16. So I did have an extra book on here for the Magical Readathon at Alchemy Quest, so I added that on top, which totaled to 5,801 pages, which just, I have managed to hit the 5,000 pages last month and this month, but I haven't done it for a little while, and so it's really weird just seeing how much I have to push myself to read, even though I'm doing less than previously. I'm just prioritizing other things, which is great, but also it's weird. With that, it equates to 187 pages per day. In terms of pages per book, that's an average of 363 pages, which is where I want to be sitting. Like that 350 mark sounds good. I had 4 books that were in the hundreds range. I had 2 that were in the 200s, 3 in the 300s, 3 in the 400s, 3 in the 500s, and 1 in the 700s, and I am so happy with that. My average rating was a 4.06, so if I have a 4+ month, the average of things I'm reading are 4 stars, which is excellent, because a 4-star for me is a great rating. For genres, I read 5 fantasy, 2 historical, 1 horror, 1 magical realism, 1 non-fiction, 1 paranormal, 1 romance, and 4 sci-fi. In format, I read 2 physical books, 1 audiobook, 3 audiobook and ebook combinations, and 10 physical audiobook combos. For age range, I read 5 middle grade, 4 YA, and 7 adult. My ratings, I had 3 3-stars, 2 3.5s, 4 4-stars, 4 4.5 stars, and 3 5-stars. In terms of standalone series, I read 1 standalone, but I'm pretty sure it's the first book in a series. So when I get news on the continuation, I will add it. But at the time of recording this, there wasn't any news, and so we'll just see how it goes. But I'm pretty sure I started a new series, and I ain't mad at it. But technically, 0 started until I get confirmation. With that, I read 11 books that were continuations of series, and that was across 9 different series. I caught up on 2 series and I finished 2. I'm thrilled. My biggest book was The Mammoth Hunters by Jean M. Uhl, which was 784 pages, and my smallest was The Ultimate, which is Animorphs Book 50 by K.A. Applegate, and that was 139. My listing hours was 50.81, explains the big books. And in terms of publication year, I had 1 from 1985, 1 from 1992, 3 between 2000 and 2005, 2 between 2006 and 2010, 1 from 2011 to 2015, 4 between 2016 and 2020, 2 from 2022, and 2 from 2023. That is everything in terms of statistics, so let's dive into the books. So the first book that my mum picked for me to read was The Return by K.A. Applegate, which is book 48 in the Animorphs series, and for The Return I gave it 3.5 stars. This is from Rachel's POV, and I fully regret binge reading the last 4 books before filming this video. I read them last night, so my brain is awash. But this is Rachel's perspective, and now knowing the ending, I'm like, I wish I paid more attention to her story arc. I did have one of my friends screaming at me to do so, but you know, I do what I do. And it was a really interesting look at her morality and what she was comfortable doing, and it was better than how I'd been feeling with some of the series. But then there was her, like, spoilers, turning into this like mammoth creature to do this fighting scene, and it was just I didn't like that fight scene at all. I felt it was very weird, and again we were in more of a dreamscape sort of setting, which I just don't really like with this, but I feel like it did do character exploration interestingly, so for that 3.5. but don't want to go into too many details because we're this far in the series. Then the next book that I finished was Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls book 2. And for this one, I gave it a 4 stars. This was not on my mum chooses the order that I read. I was just reading this to fulfill a night prompt for alchemy for the magical readathon. So that's why this was thrown in here, and I was just reading it before bed every night. And it was actually really nice to read this. So I really enjoy getting to just listen to a wide variety of interesting individuals and what they have accomplished for the world. I love the artwork, and I think it's so fascinating just hearing the stories. They're not in depth, they're not anything major, it is literally just an outline of their life, but I enjoyed it, so 4 stars. Next on the list was Before the Coffee Gets Cold, Tales from the Cafe, which is book 2 in the series by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and I gave this 5 stars. I adore this series. I am loving getting to see all the different dynamics, and the emotions portrayed in this are, yeah. It's really hard because I know that a lot of critique on it is that it's very dry, it's emotionless. But for me, I feel like there is so much emotion behind it. It is just reading into it and putting yourself in their shoes. Outward portrayals of emotions are not, you know, common in this sort of capacity. And so if there is any sense of emotion, then it's genuine. And then having the continuation in the series and seeing the characters go in a new way and the consequences of that, fascinating. I love it. I think it is such a powerful exploration of grief and dealing with loss, and also preparation for loss as well. It's beautiful. I definitely recommend giving these a go. Next on the list was A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab, and I ended up giving this a 4.5 stars. I went into it apprehensively because I know that so many people love this series, and it had been quite a bit of time since I'd read A Darker Shade of Magic, so I wasn't quite sure, but I love these characters. I loved seeing the different worlds. You sort of feel at home. Big Bad in this is quite interesting as well, since we're continuing on with the consequences from the first book, and I found it really, really interesting, and there's a competition element to it which I really, really enjoyed, and I just felt like it addressed a lot of things well, and it was a good time reading it. I flew through it. It was not a struggle to read at all. Next on the list was Hannibal Rising by Thomas Harris, and we expected this. I gave it 3 stars. I really could have lived without this. I feel like if you are going to pick up the series, stop at Hannibal, which is the 3rd one. This is giving the backstory to Hannibal Lecter, and all my concerns were correct. It was irrelevant, it was weird, it was uncomfortable, there were a lot of things that were trying to be an explanation, but it made Hannibal lose his charisma, and that is the like vital thing to Hannibal being the success that he is. He was extremely intelligent, has been his entire life according to this, but there was just something about it that wasn't right. It didn't really feel authentic to the character, and I don't feel like the life events leading, I do understand, but the life events leading up to where we meet him weren't this. But according to the author, it was. I'm not disappointed because I did lower my expectations going in, but I do wish it had have been more interesting, and I feel like Hannibal just being Hannibal for the sake of being an intellectual was enough. We didn't need to get a trauma backstory to make his character the way that he is. Next up, I read Heart of the Sun Warrior by Su Lin Tan, and I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I am happy to have concluded the duology. I think that it was wrapped up nicely. There were aspects of it that I was like, yeah, okay. The mythology in it was absolutely beautiful and excellently woven in, which was a main driving factor. I just really enjoyed getting to see all of it come to fruition, and yeah, it was mostly the romance that I was like, with both of them, one of them wants to be monogamous, okay, they both want to be monogamous, okay, we'll leave this at. But that's just me. I feel like it could have worked and there was potential for it, but the ultimate decision was one that I was very happy with. So overall, really solid duology. Not going to be everyone's favorite, but I definitely enjoyed the mythology aspects of it and reading something different. Then after reading Heart of the Sun Warrior, I ended up getting to dive into the Malignant Seven by Sebastian de Castell, and I gave this 5 stars. I Are we surprised? Absolutely not. This is one of my favorite books of this year. I do believe this will be the first in a series, and it does leave opportunity for continuations, which I'm not mad at. I will happily take more in this world. I loved the characters. I thought that the magic system was so interesting, and just the opening lines sold me. Like, I read them out to Ash and he was giggling, and it's just amazing. The first page just sold this to me, and I adore the way that Sebastian explores characters and morality, and it just hit all the right notes for me. If you want cranky ass wizards going and battling it out, being purchased for hire and trying to navigate demons and a lot of conflicting individuals, this might be your shit, because it was mine. And yeah, I just glorious. I liked that this didn't end on the same note as every other fantasy. Then I read mostly Harmless by Douglas Adams, which is the 5th, and I ended up giving it a 4 stars. It is probably closer to a 3.5, but I don't know, I just seem to get it. There is definitely a lot of misogyny, and the treatment of women is really lacking in this series, but because they are so short and quick, once I got the humor, I think it was just easy to just sit and listen to it as a fun read. Nothing serious, not trying to take itself seriously. I did find it interesting that we go in a circle for the series, and I think that is an interesting narrative choice. But aside from that, I don't have too much else to say on it. Then I read The Divergent by aka Applegate, which is the 49th book in the Animal series. We're getting there. And this is from Tobias's point of view. The family dynamics in this blew my mind. There is, and it continues on in the next books, in terms of disability representation, in which if you are not born and it is not a genetic disease that you have a disability, if you morph and then remorph back into your human self, you will be fixed, because it goes from a DNA level. So if an accident's happen or something's happened and you've had your eye cut out, this is not the animals but just me, so you can't see, you will grow the eye back, because that's part of your genetic makeup, is that you have an eye. So for that, I still gave this a 4 stars, because I love Tobias's POV and it broke me significantly reading this book. But for having that disability rep but it fixed, I don't feel comfortable with that. And then it does continue on with the later books, which I will talk to when we get up to that. I appreciate that they're following the science, I just don't like it ethically. I feel like you can do disability rep and they not be cured, but the whole time, if they got injured in battle while in their morphs, if they just merge back to human, they could go again. So I get that it's keeping true to form, but I think there might have been other ways of going about it than this way. But I do love Tobias, I do love all the dynamics that happen in this, and I really appreciated it. Then I read Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the 2nd in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, and I gave this a 4.5 stars. I really enjoy this. I really love the dynamic in this, and like when he sees her like exposed shoulder and nearly faints, I nearly fainted. It's brilliant. I really enjoy the time periods that these are set through, and just having a good old romp in them. Obviously there is a lot of darkness that is occurring, and Audrey is suffering from some pretty heavy duty, I don't want to put a label on it, but it's like PTSD sort of elements from the first book, and so it's continuing in here. She really questions her judgment and if this is the right path for her to be taking, and at the end of the day she's not fixed. She continues to feel emotions, but she can be at peace with what happened in the first book, and then the adventure that they go on at the very end, brilliant. It was next level, like kind of creepy, and I quite enjoyed that. Not like people would have be creeped out if they weren't scaredy cats like me. But I liked that element, and it's extreme. These are extremely atmospheric books. So 4.5. The next one I read is Amari and the Great Game by Vivic Elston, so I'm now caught up in the series, and I gave this a 4.5 as well. For me, this wasn't quite the 5-star, just because there were elements that I was like, this is weird, this feels a little bit out of character for Amari and a couple of our other side characters, but I really, really love being back in this world and seeing Amari grow and learn, and I really enjoyed that they explored a friendship breakup and the sort of ways that you end up in those situations without meaning to, and learning who to depend on and how to face such negativity, because Amari's fluctuates in this between being extremely popular and extremely not, and I thought that was a really nice aspect to add. So next up I read The Ultimate, which is book 50 in the Animal series by K.A. Applegate, and this I gave a 3.5 to because of it focusing around disability and the way that the characters approach people with disabilities. So Axe, our resident alien, is a dickhead towards people with disabilities and has been, because they're seen as useless in the Andalite society. I do understand that that's their makeup, but the way he goes about things, nah. With that, it is Cassie's book, so there is a lot of empathy and a lot of reflection on what is the right thing to do, because what they are doing is recruiting kids from a hospital that have disabilities, whether that be from an accident or genetic disorder that has been from birth. So with that, they are able to fix some kids that have been in accidents, not those that are born with it. Then the kids are expected to stay at the hospital and pretend to still be disabled on the day-to-day. There wasn't really much discussion in that, because it was like, oh, they're doing it for the greater good, so like they can't just leave, they can't go into hiding, because then they'll know what's going on. But I still didn't feel comfortable with it. I didn't like the idea of using this disabled kids, because the Yerks, who are the aliens and parasitic, want bodies that they can manipulate and that they can use to be able to experience the world. And those with disabilities are not ideal hosts. It was discussed in a way that it's like this thinking of disability was bad, but I don't think it was done tastefully. I think there are a lot better way of going about it, and I do love the characters that get introduced. They're known as the auxiliary animals, and I do love them. They were beautiful, beautiful characters. So it was nice getting to know the characters. It was just the way that it was gone about. It was like 2001. I think that it's important to acknowledge that there is disability rep, and it does give people with disabilities the freedoms to go about and just enjoy a sense of smell, being able to see again, being able to walk or run, be an animal. So there are like the positive sides, but I don't think the conversation was as nuanced as I would like as an adult reading a middle grade / YA. And then Cassie's moral ambiguity flip-flap-flopping was just very interesting, and the ending of this book was an ultimate game changer for the last 4 books in the series. So that was very interesting. Next up, I read The Mammoth Hunters by Jean M. Ull, and I gave this 3 stars. I am not loving this series as much as I thought I was going to, which is really disappointing, because I was so excited to read these, because I loved Clan of the Cave Bear previously. I don't know why I'm not vibing with it as much as Clan of the Cave Bear, but I think it has to do with, again, the beliefs of people and the constant conflict between the clan and the others, and we're now with the others, not the clan. The way that it's explored feel could have been done a lot better. It wouldn't be accurate to say that like, oh, it was all sunshine and rainbows between the two and one side wasn't negative towards the other, because in the books they're negative towards each other anyway. But the way that they treat mixed kids as well as Ayla who are living with them, it's interesting. I know there's growth in the communities and there is still support for Ayla, but I don't know, it's not hitting the right note. Also, the sex scenes, I have no qualms with smut, none. Historical smut, however, apparently is, and potato smut are apparently where I draw the lines. Talking about touching a fluffy mound and stuff, I was just like, furry mound, that's the one. I get the descriptor, but I was just, no, thanks. And then again with a sort of love triangle miscommunication in a historical setting, like come on. I was so interested in the way that their lived experience was, and I appreciated that you could have multiple partners, and in this the tribe is more open to women leading and their role in society is a lot more positive than that of the clan, which is women are subservient. But it's just like there was so much miscommunication that it was uncomfortable. And then people were sopping in the corner, but then other people were like joyous and then depressed, and there was one black guy, which is a luxury, there was some term used and it's like he's beautiful because he's so foreign, but he's part of this tribe. And there were just a lot of things that I was like, why am I slugging through this? Because I don't feel like I'm getting what I want, which was to learn and experience life back then. And there were aspects to it, like we learned about bead making and clothing dyeing and the art that has to be that, but our protagonist would then just like, oh, what about this? Oh, what about this? And I do appreciate like the merging of clan and tribe styles, because she would use things that the clan had used to sort of bring into it. But there was just stuff that I didn't like, and I feel, I can't remember explicitly, but I'm pretty sure there was like a consensual sex scene, but she was drunk out of her mind. So I'm like, and then miscommunication on top of that. So wrong people giving wrong signals, but her not saying anything because that's the signal. But just, yeah. I'm going to continue on with the next book, but if I get partway through, it is 994 pages, and if I'm not loving it, I'm probably going to pass on the rest of the series just because there is so much more book and I don't know if this is going to be the game that I want. This was put down for a book that my mother would like, for TBR Knockout, and when we were filming my TBR, Mum's like, oh, I think that might have been the book that I stopped liking it. Might be the next one though, so you know, we'll see how we go. I think it might have been this one. So I'll see how the fourth book goes, but I don't have high hopes for the rest of the series after this book, unfortunately. Now next up is when I mildly deviated from my mother's settings, and that is because I read The Mime Order by Samantha Shannon. Now I read this when I did and picked it up early because we were originally going to have book club on the last weekend of the month, and I'd forgotten that that was the case, and so I needed to read this for book club. We ended up pushing it back a week, so I could have continued as normal, but that was fine, which was what I was thinking. The weekend we did have the live show was what it was going to be, forgetting it we'd pushed it forward a week, but then so when I realized, I was like, shit. So I picked this up and I gave this a 4.5. I really enjoy this series. I love getting to know Paige and the world. I do miss the grunginess of the first one, and just having, I feel like we've got bigger exposure happening now. The world is definitely growing and we are learning so much more. There were a few elements of info dumping, but overall I just really could get lost in this. I wasn't having to struggle to keep who was who in my mind. I sort of just let it flow. There is one character that we don't know much about, and I was just there for the mystery. Still don't know, so still here for the mystery, and I'm very keen to continue on with the rest of the series now that the last chunk of this really set up shit. So I feel like the first book we had a complete plot twist, then we came back to the first part of the first book, and now we're like in a whole other kettle of fish. It's related, but so different dynamics. Speaking of dynamics, I loved the friendships in this, and I really love all the different dynamics between the characters, and I'm curious to see how it shapes up for the next one. So then I jumped back on track and read Radiance by Katie Robert, gave this 5 stars. This is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but fuck, I fly through this and have a glorious time in the process. Smart. That I like, in the way that I like it. This is following Cassandra and Apollo, which is an interesting pairing considering the actual myth. I do know also, again with Hades and Persephone, not a positive relationship. We're talking about dealing with gods here. But holy shit, Apollo is the most cinnamon roll of character in this, and I adore them. Cassandra, I feel, was well played as keeping true to form but still having enough independence and enough sense of self, not becoming that person that everyone shuns. It's just very interesting how Katie Robert decided to go about the dynamic with Cassandra and Apollo. There was a sort of games aspect to this which I I love. So I really, really liked that. And we're definitely starting to approach expanding the world into a whole new area. The only thing that was frustrating was seeing the character's motivations be completely null and void by the end. And I was just like, that's fine. So if you want to hear a fault, there it is. Aside from that, I adored this. I love the sex scenes. I love just the steaminess and beauty that is Katie Roberts and her characters. And then the final book that I read in May was Beautiful Darkness by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll, and I gave this a 3 stars. This does not have the nostalgic vibes associated with it that I was hoping it would, but I have read it. I did a buddy read, and it really doesn't go in a way that I was expecting it. There are elements to it that made it a very typical YA fantasy. A lot of, I'm not talking to you because I don't want to communicate with you, and then, oh, you're becoming a prissy girl that wears makeup, so you're not my girlfriend because I don't like girls who wear makeup. Like, fuck. It was a lot harder to ignore the YA writing in this, and I appreciate a good YA story, and I don't feel this was that. I don't know, the ending has set up the series to go a really interesting place as we get a lot more characters involved and a lot more a serious big bad. Like, I've never felt like a threat for this series. And there were aspects to it that I enjoyed. It was fun, it was fast paced. I enjoy getting to see the new characters that get introduced in this. But then there was a lot of YA tropes that I just don't vibe with anymore. And that's okay. I definitely think I would have enjoyed this more a couple of years ago, and if I had more of a nostalgic vibe attached to it. But it is what it is. I will probably try the next book in the series and see how we're going, similar to the Mammoth Hunters. I don't like abandoning series, but I don't want to waste my time on it either. But I'm curious to see how it shapes up. So if the third one goes better, we'll see. Overall, not the strongest book that I've ever read. This plus 3 Animorphs and Mostly Harmless were the 16 books that I read in May. I'm very excited to have a slightly cruisier month in June. We'll see where my reading takes me. With that, let me know in the comments, what was the best book that you've read in May? Are you happy with how your reading's been going this year? I can't believe we're almost hitting the halfway mark of the year. Like, oh, please make it stop. But yeah, let me know in the comments below your favourite book or just any interesting choice that you made last month. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!